Welcome to today's Explainer. We are slowing things down a bit today to explore a deeply resonant concept from our source material, the Divine Weaver, and how we can actually find profound purpose in our unfinished chapters. If you've ever felt like your life is a book that's being written just a little too slowly, or maybe the plot took a massive turn you definitely didn't see coming, well, this analysis is absolutely for you. We're going to unpack a framework that really helps us make sense of the waiting, the delays, and the utter confusion we all inevitably face at some point. So let's take a deep breath, ground ourselves, and dive right in. So I want to ask you, what are your unfinished chapters? Where in your life do you feel stuck on a really messy, incomplete page? Just think about that for a second. We have to acknowledge something deeply human right off the bat here. Navigating seasons of waiting is exhausting. It is just incredibly frustrating to stare at a closed door or to feel like you have zero control over where your life is actually heading. Our sources heavily recognize this deeply human tension. When we're stuck right in the middle of a story that doesn't make sense yet, literally all we see is the mess. But what if that mess is actually the site of active, purposeful creation? To wrap our heads around this, the sources anchor us in a really foundational ancient text, Ecclesiastes 3:11. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. This text is just so incredibly rich. I really want you to focus on that middle phrase for a moment. Eternity in the human heart. There's a reason we constantly feel this stirring, right? This whisper that tells us, hey, there must be more to my story. Well, according to this framework, that feeling isn't a flaw, it's a feature. It's basically a built-in reminder that our immediate, messy reality is just one small part of a much larger, unseen narrative. Notice the fascinating linguistic pivot the sources highlight here. On one hand, we have made, which is a past tense, completely finished event. But on the other hand, we have makes, an ongoing active process. The sources emphasize that the Divine Weaver is currently actively weaving beauty out of the messy, incomplete pages of our lives right now. It's not like God just did something and walked away. It's that the process of making things beautiful is happening right at this very moment, in the exact areas where you probably feel the most unresolved. Section 1. Navigating unfinished chapters, identifying the messy pages. Before we can find purpose in our wait, we actually need to recognize these unresolved chapters in our daily lives. The sources give us a few clear indicators to look out for. First, there's confusion or perceived brokenness. You just can't see how the pieces are going to fit together. Second, impatience and an overwhelming desire for control. Third, you are quite literally in a season of waiting. Fourth, you see the persistence of messy pages, those areas of life that refuse to look polished no matter how hard you try to fix them. And finally, that internal whisper of discontent. Now, the absolutely crucial point here is connecting that final bullet to what we talked about just a minute ago. That discontent isn't necessarily a bad attitude. It is literally the eternity placed in the human heart, signaling that your current chapter is incomplete and the Divine Weaver is still working. Section 2. Purpose in the waiting. The functional stage of preparation. We really need to totally reframe how we view delays. Waiting time is not a passive delay. It's not God hitting the pause button on your life. Rather, it's a highly functional, active stage within the process of making, where the Divine Weaver is actively shaping you for what is coming next. Because we cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end, as the text says, waiting forces us to engage with an eternal perspective. It shifts our intense, anxious focus away from demanding immediate results and pivots it toward the much bigger story that we're being prepared for. To make this concrete, the sources use some beautifully powerful natural metaphors. Think about winter turning into spring or a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. You see, a caterpillar doesn't just sprout wings and fly away one sunny afternoon. It goes into a dark, highly restrictive space where it completely breaks down before it transforms. And winter, it feels completely dead and stagnant, right? But beneath the soil, massive, vital preparation is happening for the spring. The sources suggest that the discomfort of waiting in your own life is actually a necessary period of profound internal transformation. It's the discomfort of the cocoon or the winter soil. Yeah, it is uncomfortable for sure, but it is deeply, deeply purposeful. Section 3. The Divine Redirection. Seeing closed doors differently. Honestly, next to waiting, is there anything that causes more frustration in an unfinished chapter than a door slamming shut right in your face? Probably not. But consider how closed doors actually function according to this framework. First, they provide strategic redirection. They narrow our path, purposely keeping us away from outcomes that just don't fit the full picture. Second, they are an essential component of difficult, shaping seasons. Third, and this is a huge one, they become visible primarily through retrospection. When you're standing right in front of a locked door, literally all you feel is failure or rejection. It's often only years later, looking back, that you realize that closed door was actually divine architecture saving you from the wrong path. Finally, closed doors protect the narrative. They keep you moving toward that something bigger. Section 4. Surrendering the pen, relinquishing control to the divine weaver. Okay, so if we're facing these closed doors and waiting periods, what do we actually do? The sources introduce a core actionable practice by asking a tough question. Are you wresting the pen away from the maker? Just visualize that for a second. You and the divine weaver both grabbing onto the pen, totally fighting over who gets to write the very next sentence of your life. Trying to force an outcome, trying to control a timeline that you really don't fully understand, well, it generates intense anxiety and absolute human exhaustion. The framework we're exploring suggests that true preparation only happens when we stop fighting for the pen and start trusting divine timing. So, how do we practically drop the pen? The sources map out a brilliant cyclical 3-step process. Step 1 is confession of control, typically through prayer. It's the active, honest acknowledgement that, yeah, you've been trying to force things. Step 2 is retrospective reflection. This is where you look back at your past closed doors and previous difficult seasons, and you gather the historical evidence of how you were guided and protected before. And that evidence directly fuels Step 3, resting in peace. When you realize the Maker has safely guided you in the past, you can actually trust those loving hands with your present, unresolved mess. This cycle beautifully bridges the gap between our everyday human confusion and true divine peace. Our source material provides this wonderful excerpt from a daily prayer that just perfectly encapsulates this kind of surrender. Thank you for seeing beauty where I see brokenness and purpose where I see confusion. Honestly, this is the ultimate relief of the whole framework. You don't have to figure it all out. You just have to trust the artist. By consistently placing your unfinished chapters back into safe hands, you get to trade the sheer exhaustion of control for the peace of being woven into a masterpiece. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought today. Where in your life must you trust that God's timing is better than your own? Take a real moment with that. Look at those messy pages, those unfinished chapters, those closed doors. What would it actually look like to drop the pen today and let the divine weaver finish the story? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, remember, your incomplete pages are part of a much, much bigger picture.